some of my humanity.
You were in a bank robbery?
I was in a bank robbery.
The Bible calls us to love.
Said that to me again.
There we go. Got to put the hat on.
It's my podcast hat.
Hey, podcast hat.
It was an accident at first. I didn't have a haircut. But now I'm just like,
That's so.
this is my hat now.
That's so real.
Man.
So you can for me, you can always tell how the week is going based on my haircut. If my head is shaved and I look good, I'm rocking.
You're rocking.
But when you saw me at Ebony and Ivory the other day, yeah,
It was a rough day.
I had the friar tuck going. That's the kind of week it was.
Do you get a haircut before every Sunday?
Yeah. I have to shave my head. Yeah, very little grows back, but it's enough to have to like razor it.
Where do you go?
I do it myself.
You do it by with a razor?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's I don't know. Like I feel like my hairline is like been receding since I was like a couple months old.
But at least you still.
And I'm being so serious. If you saw baby pictures of me, you'd be like, you got the same looking hairline. Like I look at pictures of me and I'm like, I look like an old young man. Like seriously.
Old soul.
Like you saw
Old
the picture.
soul.
Like I got this stomach kind of in the way I'd be walking. My stomach was always out and my hairline was just like running from me.
Yeah.
You know. So all my life I had to run.
All your life.
I've been running my whole life. Been running for the Lord though.
I believe
been
it.
running for the Lord.
Hey, that's it. It's a race. It's a race.
Jamaal, I've got a few questions I want to ask you today.
All right.
Right. The first question, would you do us the honor in singing your first gospel song that you wrote for us? Oh, wait, that's not. Sorry, that's the different interview.
Man,
My bad.
you trying to set me up. I was about to get up.
I'm just
One of
playing.
them Breakfast Club interviews where they get up and just leave.
Just walk away.
Whole entourage gone.
Team, we out.
Yep.
Let's go.
It's one of them.
But no, tell me a little bit about where you're from. Tell me about your background. How did you get into ministry? Just kind of walk us through that step.
Yeah, that is a long story. So hopefully this is a 2-hour podcast.
45 minutes. So we'll be all right. But, don't worry. You'll be all right.
No. So I grew up in South Carolina. So grew up in the South. 2-parent household, thankfully. And my dad worked a lot and my mom worked a lot. I'm an only child. But my parents were really big on education. So they sent me to a private Catholic school. So it was interesting growing up because Sunday I had this Black Baptist church experience. Went to Springfield. Shout out to Springfield Baptist Church, Greenville.
Greenville?
Yeah, Greenville. And so I had that Black Baptist church experience. Put the suit on. Very kind of conservative Black tradition. But heard good preaching. And then on Thursday I had mass. At the Catholic school. And so there was this different mix. And I remember it's probably 9 or 10. And if the way it worked at mass is one of the classes would do the reading for the week. Mm-hmm. So it was our week. So we were in there practicing. And if you're non-Catholic, you can't go up there and do that, which makes sense. But anyway, so we're all just sitting there watching the two people kind of practice. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, all right, Lord, like, what is this all about? What is this all about? I'm hearing about it on Sunday. I'm hearing about it a lot at the Catholic school. Who is this Jesus? And I just, it wasn't audible or anything, but, I just remember feeling, the Lord was like, follow my son. Mm-hmm. And I was like, all right, I'll do that. And that was right around the same time I got baptized in the church and all that stuff. And so it just started this long journey of figuring things out. So get to middle school, read through the Bible in a year, mainly because, again, I was at the Catholic school and very catechized and that kind of thing. So was able to navigate the scriptures fairly well, but became very legalistic. And that rolled over into high school, looked down on people. But I was living this double life where I was like, I was a sinner away from school, but then looking down on people because, they did things that I didn't do. It was bad. But then got to college and found some discipleship. Yeah. And somewhere in there, high school, college, I remember I was sitting down with my pastor from Greenville Shout out to Pastor Corbett.
Greenville?
Yep. and he was like, "You're gonna be a pastor one day." Because I was involved in church and especially youth day and that kind of thing. And I was like, "Nah, Pastor Corbett, ain't no money in it." And he was like, "You right." But you gonna be a pastor.
How encouraging was that when he was like, "You right"?
Yeah, I was like, thrown off. I was kind of confused.
Selling this to me, right?
No, right. Yeah, this is not something I'm sold on, and I wasn't at all. Not even a little bit. I ran from that calling for a long time, and especially high school, college, and then like I got involved in a campus ministry when I got to school. I wanted to go wild out when I got to school. Like that was number one on the list.
Is this college now? Or
College.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Day one.
Yes.
Right. Got invited to the frat party because it's freshman move-in day, and I was like, I'm going. Like this is it.
Yeah.
I made it.
They don't know me here.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm about to go crazy. I was at that party for about 10 minutes, and then I walked back to campus. Probably like a 15-minute walk back to campus, and I was like, that ain't me. And not that it was crazy or debaucherous, but it was just like that ain't me. So, and that was the night I got connected with Reformed University Fellowship, and fell in love with it. Found community, found discipleship, found a lot of things that I didn't find growing up. And not that it was like this like grandiose thing, but it was definitely something where I found people who loved Jesus, wanted to represent him well, and do that in the college setting. And I was like, this is different. And especially that discipleship piece, right?
Yeah.
That was the big part, was somebody sitting down and being like, yeah, this is how you walk through the scriptures. Like this is how it all works. So anyways, that set me on this journey of ministry after that. So then I had this, at the end of college, I was a chemistry major, wanted to go to medical school, and almost did, and think about that a lot.
Kind of like wonder if you should have went to medical school.
Not a regret thing, but just like, man, I used to be smart.
Come on, man. You are still incredibly smart.
Used to be smart.
Used to be.
Yeah, used to be. No, but yeah, became an intern, moved down to Jackson, Mississippi, met my wife, had a good time there. Shout out to Jackson State.
Jackson State.
Yeah,
JSU.
hey, the Sonic Boom, they doing their thing down there. We had, man, the music was fantastic. And and then this kind of figuring out when and how to get into pastoral ministry, or if pastoral ministry was the thing. I mean, there's so many ways to do ministry, and so many different callings. And so just there was a lot of discernment, and it took a while, and there were some ups and downs. I won't bore you with all that, but we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you go from Mississippi. Now we're in Washington State.
Right.
How did you get from Mississippi to Washington State?
Man, Mississippi via Australia, via South Carolina, via Washington State. So we finished the RUF internship, 2 years down there, and I was ready to go to seminary. And my wife was like, nah, we need some like life experience. I was like 23, 24. And I was like, no, babe, like we just need to go get this education, like right now, right? Because I had a way to pay for it and all this stuff. I mean, I was gonna have to work and do some other things, but it was gonna work out. And we were young, and she was adamant. She was like, no, and that was a big like, what you mean no? Like this is what I committed to. This is what I came to do. And I felt like, and hindsight is always 20/20. I wasn't even mad at her. I was mad at the Lord. I was like, Lord, like medical school, and now you're not. And then I make the decision to go into ministry, right, and figure this thing out, and you just sweep the rug right out from under me. And so there was this like 2 or 3 year period where I was, what I would say was, looking back, I was depressed. For sure. Yeah. But we moved to Australia because there was an opportunity. So my mother-in-law is Australian.
Okay.
So there's the Aussie connection. And we moved over there on a whim, just to do construction with Beth's uncle. And shout out to Rivcott. It is now the largest cotton gin.
Cotton gin. Ooh.
Yeah.
We're in Australia.
In Australia.
They're still rocking cotton gins.
It's still,
out there, huh?
they yeah, it's a big cash crop over there. Who knew? I certainly didn't. But we moved over there to build a cotton gin. You know, black guy from South Carolina.
That's like
building a cotton gin.
Can we take a moment and just let's pause on that whole historical what you just said.
Right.
A black man from South Carolina living in Mississippi. Moving to Australia to build a cotton gin.
Yeah.
Is that a book title?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Or
That's a
at least,
Netflix
like,
special.
I'm watching it.
Oh yeah,
I'm watching
it's
it.
a docuseries.
Something. There's something else in there. I won't go down there too, but that's a
yeah.
I'm like chewing on that in my own
right.
head
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
you got to process that one.
What part of South Carolina are you from again?
Greenville.
Yeah. And how close is that to Charleston?
Probably about 3 hours.
About 3 hours. So east, west, south.
Yeah. So I'm northwest of Charleston.
Northwest.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
See.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Man.
Yeah.
And I told you, my family, they're from James Island.
That's right.
Right.
Hey,
So
that's hey.
You know, South Carolina.
They
is
the Geechees down there.
they speak it. Shout out to Uncle Wester.
Hey, shout out to Uncle. Hey, that's what's up.
All right, so
That's
you're
what's up.
in Australia there. You're
Yep.
building, you're doing construction.
Yep.
Then what happens after
Yep.
that?
Heavy machinery, all that stuff. Never I haven't done any of that. Right. Have no background in any of that. But it was great. It was a good experience. Loved it. It was a great change of pace from the American life. Right. Where we just we were living out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this thing like you don't build this in Sydney. Yeah. We're 7 hours inland in the bush. And kangaroos everywhere.
You saw actual kangaroos.
Oh, for sure.
Did you ever
Like
get in a
not
fight with
just
one?
no.
I've seen the videos, and I'm wondering.
No,
is that a real thing? People are fighting kangaroos.
Yeah. You got to fight them off your land, but
You say it as if you gotta shoo off the kangaroo.
yeah. You don't want them messing up your land.
Are they big?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh for sure.
Like little people, big.
Yeah, like my size, big.
Do they have 6-packs?
Not all of them.
You've seen a kangaroo with a 6-pack?
Yeah, the red ones. Those are the biggest ones. The red ones.
Okay.
So I think there's red and gray. The gray ones are the smaller ones. Those are cute ones.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I just learned so much more about life.
See, yeah.
Just already. This is good.
Don't quote me on that though. I'm not a zoologist, but
you're a chemist. Yeah.
I am a chemist.
I got you.
That's what the degree says.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we were there, finished the cotton gin, and I had a kid. My oldest, Cameron, was born over there, so that was a whole awesome thing during that time. And then I was like, oh man, my visa's about to run out. We got to figure something out. So we moved back and trying to figure out a few things. Moved back to South Carolina. Since I had just come out of construction, went to work for a general contractor. That was fun, and did that for about a year, and was like, okay, Lord, since ministry isn't something that you're going to let me pursue, I'm going to go back to the original plan.
Interesting.
Go to med school.
Yeah.
So I joined the Army.
Okay. This is your life is so amazing.
Everybody's going to be like, what is going on?
Yeah.
So I joined the Army, and this was the thinking. It was like, okay, I can be a nurse for a few years, get back in the medical scene, all that stuff, utilize my chemistry degree, kind of, sort of, and then apply for med school, take the MCAT, all that stuff all over again. Yeah, because I had timed out. It was a whole thing, but that was the plan. And did that, joined the Army, 2016, shout out Fort Benning. They changed the name, and I can't remember now what the name of it is.
All the forts are getting changed.
I know. Yeah. So that's the whole thing. But went down there and then San Antonio, and then was thinking we were going to get stationed somewhere else. But we got stationed in Washington.
Fort Lewis.
JBLM.
Was it JBLM or Fort Lewis at the time?
JBLM.
It was JBLM.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is, what year is this?
2017.
Okay.
We moved up here.
Okay.
Yeah. So January 17, we get up here. I'm active duty, working at the hospital on labor and delivery. Yeah.
You were bringing babies into the world.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Right.
You've delivered babies.
Yeah.
That's pretty legit.
It was crazy.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
man.
because the Army puts you where they got slots and that kind of thing. And so, but shout out to labor and delivery at Madigan. Very formative very fun, very man, just and I think they just got an award, like the OB section, OBGYN section at Madigan. They just won an award, and well deserved. Like, I don't know what award it was. I saw it on Facebook, but well deserved. I mean, just a great team, phenomenal people. And yeah, it really shaped a lot of a huge part of me and Beth's life. Mainly because so when we 2018, Beth was pregnant. She was about 33 weeks pregnant, and we hadn't felt the baby in a while. So we drove up to Madigan, and me working on labor and delivery, we can get in, and we got backdoor connections. So they do the ultrasound, or they do the little, put the monitors on. They couldn't find it. They couldn't find Caleb's heartbeat. So we were like, okay, and for me, this standard procedure, it's, baby small, monitors aren't perfect, technology's not always the best. But then they brought the ultrasound in. I was like, oh boy. So they're looking for the heartbeat, couldn't find it. And you can see baby on the ultrasound, and and those terrible words that I had heard before, but never really resonated with me. Your baby doesn't have a heartbeat. And so that was around the time, actually, like, I was set to take the MCAT the next day, or the next week, actually. And so that was probably the hardest time of my life. Having to grieve with my wife, and then also be a husband, and also be a dad to Cameron, and just all the things that we had to manage in that moment. I was set to go to training that next week as well. So it was just, man, yeah, August of 2018 was a rough time. And just really the rest of 2018. And so walking through that, and just the way the Lord, again, shout out to Labor and Delivery, because, man, they loved on us. They lavished grace upon us. I mean, we went through the whole thing. Caleb came out, cord was wrapped around his neck. So that was what happened. And man, we got home, and there was food everywhere. There were gift cards. There were cars. I mean, stuff just came pouring in from all the folks on L&D. And so that was huge. Like, that's an understatement. Just that that was the love of Jesus. Yeah. And a lot of those people don't believe in the Lord. And I was just, it struck me, man. It really did. And so after that, I shouldn't say got through that, but that was, big deal. And so then I'm like, all right, Lord, didn't do as well on the MCAT, obviously, as I wanted to. Still applied to a few places. And so as you're waiting to hear back from schools that you applied to, January, February is usually when you hear back. It was probably, I don't know, November, December. And so after I took some time off and that kind of thing and whatnot. And then when I came back, I got moved to the admin side. So no longer clinical, that's the fun side where you're putting IVs in and delivering babies. But I got moved to the admin side, and I was like, all right, Lord, what is going on? I want to be in the action back with my friends. So I'm not on labor and delivery anymore. I'm in the command suite. And so I'm like, all right, Lord, what are you trying to do with me here? That kind of thing. And I'm not admin oriented whatsoever, but you do what the Army tells you to do. And so anyways, what I didn't know was that the Lord was setting me. There was this huge trajectory that he had me on, not only to go through what we went through with Caleb, because we had the funeral and everything. People came. It was, a big deal. Randy, our pastor, preached the gospel. People who wouldn't have come, people who would never step foot in a church heard the gospel. Like, and that was huge. And I had to keep that in mind as we were continuing to grieve, especially in those early stages of grief. But anyways, I was in the command suite, and the chaplain comes and talks to the commander about once a week. and he was passing through, week after week. And one day he just stopped and he said, "Hey, Specialist Cox, have you ever heard of the chaplain candidate program?" I was like, "No, sir. What? I don't know what that is." He was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go into the meeting, and then when I come out, I'll talk to you about it." So he came and talked to me. Korean guy, Presbyterian, and I had been in the PCA, obviously with Reformed University Fellowship, so very familiar with where he was coming from. And so we just talked about that, and he was like, "You can become a chaplain." I was like, "No way." And so again, going back over the story, when Beth and I decided not to go to seminary, any sort of ministry opportunity after that was always a conflict, always arguing about it. And so I was very afraid to broach this subject with the wife, as you can imagine, right?
Yeah.
And so I walked in that same day, because I'm one of those guys that's like, "Oh, it's on my mind. I'm gonna talk. I gotta say something." So I was like, "Hey, babe, what do you think about this? It means seminary. It means this, that." And she, without hesitation, was like, "Yeah, I've been thinking about that the last couple of weeks."
Interesting.
Not necessarily chaplaincy, but like ministry and seminary.
Yeah.
And I was like, why didn't you say something? You
were walking on.
I'm over here trying to figure out. Yeah, I'm on pins and needles, trying to figure out what we're gonna do. Still, because once the Lord calls you, I feel like you can't run away from it.
You can't hide.
And I had been running away from it. And so once she kind of like put the air underneath my wings, I was like, "All right, no to medical school again.
Wow.
Let's figure out this chaplain thing." And so, yeah, got accepted to the program, finished the program. So you have to move from active duty to the reserves. So I've been at my reserve unit now for about almost 4 years. Been great, phenomenal. I'm a full-fledged chaplain now. And so that was how I was able to complete seminary. The Army paid for it. And so and then so I got to a point, probably about 18 months ago, where I was like, "All right, am I going to go back to active duty, or am I going to try to do this pastor thing somewhere?"
Yeah.
And so when I got to New Salem, I initially got to New Salem just to get a piece of paper for ordination, just to say, "Hey, yeah, he can preach," and gospel ministry type stuff.
Wait, how did you find New Salem? Like, did you know someone that went there, or?
Yeah. So when we got up here, we got connected with the church, and through that church, I got connected with Lonnie Arnold.
Yep.
And so I don't know,
everyone. Like
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's wild.
At the time, right? It was just like, "Oh, you're a older black man who is in a mixed race marriage, like." You're in your 60s, you guys are in your, how did y'all make that work?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard enough my wife is Caucasian, so it's hard enough being in a mixed race marriage, all the cultural differences and, family and all the things, right, to navigate as, in 2013 when we got married, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about somebody who got married in like the 60s and 70s.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's.
And made it.
Yeah. And
had, 10 kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Yes. He's that guy.
So,
he's that guy.
So when I got connected with him, and he had been in the PCA at one point in time. And so it was like, why, it's like, all right, this is not a coincidence. So he kind of became my mentor. And that was 2018, right before we lost Caleb. And so, he was there walking with us through it a little bit. And yeah, so all that to say is like, yeah, he had been my mentor. And so once we were trying to figure those kind of things out, he was aware of what was going on. And so he was like, "Hey, just, come to New Salem and check it out." So I was like, all right, let's try this. So now, I grew up in the Black Baptist Church, New Salem at that time, Black Baptist Church, white wife.
I love that. I love that.
Who and then to Beth's credit, I love my wife. To Beth's credit, she had been in Mississippi for 10 years when I met her.
Was she born in Mississippi?
She was not.
Okay.
So she is not a Mississippian. And shout out to Mississippi, but Mississippi is a different type of South. Like, I'm from South Carolina.
Yeah.
I'm from the South.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mississippi is like stepping back another 30 years.
It's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different on both sides,
Yeah.
black and white.
Yeah.
Like, it's just different.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you walk into that space that Mississippi is in, and you're not from there, it's a very weird place to be. It's you can adapt and assimilate to a certain degree, but it's just different. Like I think there's a crazy statistic that in Mississippi, I think it's like 85% of the people that live in Mississippi grew up in Mississippi.
That's a high number.
Right.
That's a very high number.
So very familial.
Yeah.
Generations.
Yes.
Right.
Roots go deep in Mississippi.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, black and white, and so you have that dynamic. And so if you're not from there, you didn't go to the high school, you didn't this kind of thing. They can tell, they know. And so there's a wall. And so for my wife, like she felt that wall. She ran into that wall constantly in those 10 years while she was down there, high school and whatnot. And so, taking her back into this kind of black context was like, we went to New Salem, and the first Sunday, Lonnie invited us. We went, and we sat after service. It was good. It was great. The music was fantastic. Preaching was good. Sat down with Larry, who was the pastor at the time, and just talking about a little bit about our story, and then a little bit about what we were trying to do with the chaplaincy stuff. And he was like, "Yeah, we can figure out some ordination stuff and get you there." And we get in the car, and I'm just waiting.
Wait for Beth to say something.
Yeah, waiting for the assessment, because she gonna let me know what the assessment was.
Love it.
And she was like, "I loved it." And I was like, oh, hold on, you don't say you love anything. My wife is a skeptic, which balances me out pretty well. But yeah, I was like, what do you mean? She was like, she said, and again, Mississippi, 10 years. She said that was the first time I've walked into a black context where, especially with a black husband, where I didn't feel like the black women were looking down on me.
Ooh, that's rich.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very
Shout out to Tiffany Miller.
Yeah.
Tiff, you are probably the reason we're at New Salem. So huge shout out to her. Yeah, because Tiffany was one of the first people to talk to her. And I think we sat, I don't remember if we sat near them or whatever, but I remember after church, they talked for a good 10 or 15 minutes. And, I just let it happen. I'm just kind of watching from the side. But to hear that, it was just like, whoa, that was a big deal. And that was a big deal for Beth. And so once we so then it was like, all right, well, we'll start attending regularly. We'll become members. So we did. And through that process, getting ordained there, trying to figure out whether or not go active duty, or as I developed in, going through seminary, I fell in love with the church, man. I really did. Fell in love with God's people. And I was like, man, this is like, to be a pastor is like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And even I remember going to, as I'm going to classes and things like that, Pastor Corbett is echoing in my ears, "You're going to be a pastor."
Interesting. I love. And how many years ago was that when he said that?
Oh man, at that point, that's probably 15 years. Yeah. Between those two instances.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, and then we got plugged in, and that's just what we do. Like, Beth and I are built very similarly, service, wanting to be a part of something, wanting to serve the Lord, wanting to serve people. Beth has the phenomenal gift of hospitality, and then I got this big smile. So it's just,
it's a good match.
It's a great match. It's a great mix. And one thing led to another. Lots of prayer, lots of talking to wise people who are older and have been through it. And yeah, and the graciousness of Larry. Larry Jones is probably one of the most humble dudes I've ever met in my life. And I can't overstate that, because growing up in the black church, what happens is, if you're a pastor, you pastor for 40, 50 years, and the way you get out of the pulpit, the way you retire is you die.
Yeah.
You die.
That's it.
You get sick, you go to the hospital, either one of the deacons or your associate minister, right, preaches for you. You're in the hospital, people come visit you, you get all the visits, and then eventually you pass away.
Yeah.
And then there's, it's a big memorial, all that stuff. And then it's on to the next guy. But that next guy that they put in there, he's 60, 65.
Couple decades at most. If a decade at most. Yeah.
So for Larry, being at that time a 67-year-old man, to say, you know what, Jamaal, I think you're the next guy at 33. That's unprecedented, especially considering that at New Salem, Larry Jones was the one who started the work. We're not talking about somebody who's like the 10th pastor through this like lineage of people.
Yeah.
No. He's the guy who started the work, did the hard things, like went from preaching at a funeral parlor to buying a space that he couldn't really afford with 25 members at the time to building like this gospel-centered church on the corner in South Tacoma. And to say, hey man, I'm gonna let you take the keys to like, again, because it's just unprecedented. I've just seen it so many times, because I've been in so many different spaces, and this is even in the even in the PCA, even in the non-denominational sector. Like, if you're a young pastor and you want to be a pastor, what do you got to do?
You got to get to church. Got to prove your worth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or you got to plant the church.
Yeah.
You got to plant it.
Start a church.
You got to start it.
That's right. Yeah.
You got to start the work.
Or wait for someone to die. I mean, that's Yeah. I mean, you find a church with a lot of old people, and then you be like, "Yeah, here we go."
Here, and we're gonna sit here until
in about 10 years. I might be able to.
I might.
That's true.
I might be able to be up there. I'm gifted. I got the degree. I'm the youth guy. I gave my strike. I earned my strike. All this stuff, right? That like this kind of gatekeeping. And I'm getting off, but Larry's phenomenal, super humble, and so when Beth and I, again, talking about ministry, thinking about what ministry looks like, being a mixed race couple, it's like, okay, we understand what Revelation 7 is talking about when it's talking about every nation, tribe, and tongue. My wife is adamant. We don't want our kids growing up in a context, especially coming from the South, where it's just black and white.
Yeah.
I didn't have many Asian kids in my, at my school. Big, I say big, but I mean, the Latinos, they was around. But that was about it.
Yeah.
But it was still predominantly
black and white.
Yeah. And so we just didn't want our kids growing up in that, and the church shouldn't look like that either. And so
not in America.
Right.
Yeah. In 2024, it should not look that way.
Right. I mean, the melting pot, right? I mean, we grew up thinking about that, talking about that, Schoolhouse Rock, right? The melting pot.
And it's also interesting how it's easier for us to say that here in Washington State because, we got 3 military bases out here just on the west side. And we also have Fairchild, on the east side of the state.
True story.
You've got a huge influx of culture coming in. So it's easier for us to say it shouldn't look that way because of what we see every day.
Right.
But I'm very aware that, there are places out there where it really is like this is the black side of the town, that's the white side of the town.
Yep.
And, racial reconciliation in those areas looks differently.
It does.
But yeah, I still agree. Our country is becoming more and more diverse every single day. And for our churches not to reflect how our country looks is interesting, right?
It is.
And again, if you're in a place where you're 99% white, I'm expecting to go to your church and there's 99% white people.
If you're in the middle of Wyoming,
come on.
And you can't get no black people there?
Yeah, I get it. There's no black people that live there. But if you are in a mixed community, such as we are here locally, like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, there's opportunity.
Yes.
There's opportunity. And
Yeah.
it's not always easy, but yeah. Yeah, I'll meet with Lonnie tomorrow, so I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
we're going to touch on a little bit of that. Yeah.
Y'all gonna get all of that. So yeah, so coming into and so Larry had already made, like, you know, coming out of COVID, Larry had already started paving this, even before COVID. He was already paving this foundation of, hey, like we have black roots in the black church, but we don't have to be a black church. And so when we got there and we showed up on the scene, again, Lonnie's had been there 7 years prior and that kind of thing. And so there was this shift in this movement that was taking place already, that he had already set in motion. And so again, going back when Beth and I were thinking about what would it look like if I was to be a pastor, it was like, well, I don't want to be the token black guy at the white church where they're like, okay, well, we're going to use you strictly for urban ministry, right? Because I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, if that matters or means anything to anybody. I hate to be put in a box. So to tell
creative type is what we call them.
So there you go. So to tell me you can only do urban ministry, nah, man, that's crazy. So I was like, okay, well, we can't do that. And then again, having a white wife going into an all black context, it's hard to change some people's minds, right? And so that's an uphill battle, but where we were at, where New Salem was at when we started this process of trying to, of committing to being the pastor there, it was already on the trajectory. The face of the church was already changing. Larry had already instituted a lot of things. And so it was like, we want to be a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-generational.
Yeah.
You got to have some white hair.
Oh, that's good.
You got to have some gray hair, man.
Come on.
Got to have some gray hair in the church.
Yeah.
You need gray hair.
You need the elders in the church.
Oh my gosh, man. And especially being a young guy, I need those white hair guys to keep me in check.
Yeah. There's a lot of wisdom there, which, being another fellow young pastor, like, we need that. We really do, because, they didn't get wise just like by happen chance, right? They've been walking with the Lord for decades. I mean, almost as long as I've been alive. Like, we need that wisdom, and it really does help the body of Christ move. Discipleship, reaching back, lifting people up. I mean, it's the whole Elijah.
Yes.
It really it's needed so much.
It's so much. And so I had that. Like, when the opportunity came and Larry's humility, when it was like, hey, what do you think about becoming the pastor here? Obviously lots of prayer and all those things. But then when we looked at it, it was like, okay, this church is moving toward a multi-ethnic, multicultural kind of expression. And then looking at the pieces, because again, being a young guy, and even I should say, being a pastor in America, it can be really tough, especially when it's your first time, right? Because oftentimes, even again, black context, white context, it doesn't matter. You often walk into a space where you're the guy.
Yeah.
And that's it. Maybe you got an elder, maybe you got a deacon, but you're the guy.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure when you're young. Right. Which, I understand some of the like, okay, let's wait, let's develop you, let's put you on an assistant role and that kind of thing. Like there's space for that. But yeah, it's really tough to just walk into a context where you don't have a team.
Yeah.
And people who are behind you, who are willing to, like Moses, like, hey, I'm getting tired. I need you to hold my arms up.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I had that, and I have that. I mean, Lonnie's still there as the associate. Larry's still kind of this overseer type thing, just pouring wisdom into me. Like, hey, man, this is what I saw. There's a hole over there. Don't fall in that hole.
Yeah.
And then worship pastor Anthony is amazing, and his heart for worship, like not just, we just want to put some popular songs up there so people feel good about themselves. No, we want people to actually worship Jesus.
Yeah.
And then our outreach pastor, Roman. I mean, outside of Lonnie, I've never met anybody so well connected in the city.
Wow.
And not even just well connected, but willing to make more connections. I was like, man, I don't have that kind of capacity.
He's got that energy about him too.
Oh man,
like it's very. The first time I met him, I was like, this guy is super engaging. You know what I mean? Like I felt it. I was just like, I still remember our conversation that we met. We were talking about the J curve, and like literally that was the first time I met him, and it was he was just in there.
Man, that guy is crazy, and he's got a story. And so yeah, and that was another part of the just what attracted us to be at New Salem, to become the pastor at New Salem, was people were just real already. Like people had stories and they weren't afraid to tell them.
Yeah.
And there's brokenness. I mean, just like any other church, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the church.
Yeah.
It's people. They're broken. They're hurt. They've been through some stuff. But at the same time, man, they've all been redeemed.
Yeah.
And by the blood of Jesus, and that changes everything, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about your story and you share what you've been through, and you relate to people, you sympathize, you empathize, like it just comes off different when you know Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it's way more impactful when you know the Lord, and so that's what I found with the folks there. And so blessed, like beyond all measure, to be their pastor. Like it's just like it's still weird, to even say that I'm the pastor of that church. But man, and it's great. It is. It's a calling. It's an undertaking. But shout out to Mel Duncan in Greenville, a second pres. It's something that. That's what I want to do every day for the rest of my life.
Oh, I love that.
I can't see myself doing anything else.
Man, I can totally relate to that. And I also just want to call out, it's interesting. So you grew up in a Black Baptist church in South Carolina, going to a Catholic school, met a mentor who discipled you, who was from the Presbyterian side of things.
Correct.
Ended up moving to Australia.
Yep.
To build cotton gins.
Yep.
Then
did ministry over there.
Okay, so
crazy.
Did ministry over there in Australia.
Yeah.
Then going into the Army.
Yep.
Right. And then ended up here in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State.
Yep.
Where now you and your wife you are pastoring at a multi-ethnic church, and you guys are heading further and further into that direction.
Oh yeah.
One could look at your life and say that, like, had you had gone into like seminary like 15 years prior,
oh yeah,
you wouldn't be on the track that you're on right now, and your exposure would have been very limited. Your life experience has prepared you to step into the role that you are currently in.
Yep.
I say all that to say that God is never slothful. He's never lacking of a plan. He's always intentional. And when we just take a moment and take assessment of where God has brought us to and from, we can look back and say, like, he was with me the whole time. He was intentional about this happening the whole time. Yep. Like he brought me to this conversation, to this table, through this door, so that I can be here. Yep. And it gives us that sense of hope of like where he's going to take us. Yeah. I'm like, if you brought me there in the last 15 years, where is the next 15 years looks like? You know. Yep. So I think that's very, very encouraging. All right, I got a quick game for you. Ready?
Uh-oh.
This is a game I do a couple times. Right? So I'm going to give you a word.
Oh, gosh.
I'm going to give you just one word.
All right.
All right. You've got 30 seconds. I want a 30-second sermon. I don't have to have Bible. What I mean by that is, I mean, you can quote scripture if you got it, but you ain't got to be like, I think it's somewhere in, right? Because I didn't even ask you. I didn't prepare you, but I'm going to
you didn't ask me.
Just 4 words.
All right.
Just 4 words.
Okay.
We'll start, I'll even
one at a time. All right. One at a time.
You're grace.
Oh man, grace. Yeah. His grace is sufficient. Mm-hmm. And just like you were talking about, that's my story. Is his grace has been sufficient every step of the way. Getting married, the way I grew up, where I'm at now. I mean, it's only by grace. The stuff we've been through with Caleb, and even just again in our marriage is not perfect. And so it is only by grace that I'm where I'm at. And then going to the salvation part, right? It is by grace that you have been saved.
That's right.
And it's God's grace, man. He loves us so much, and it's often unfathomable, right? The level of grace that he lavishes upon us. And we take a lot of things for granted, like getting up in the morning and even getting to places like this safely. But even in the big stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like you were talking about, you look back, you reflect, and you're like, man, that was big. Australia was huge. Had I not gone to Australia, and what I heard you say was that my wife was right.
I never.
That's what you said.
I think
that's
you
what.
might have
That's
read
what you.
between-
No,
I
that's what
don't-
you said.
Did I say
You said that
the
you were.
roll
You,
back-
you
roll
said
back?
that.
Where's
you,
where's my red flag?
Oh,
The
you
challenge
gonna throw the
flag?
challenge?
Like roll that back, you know.
You said Beth was right, but yeah, it is. It's God's grace, man.
Next word is unity.
Man, I preached on this yesterday. Actually, partly. We were talking about baptism and communion, and being, baptism being unified with Christ in His death, and then in communion, in 1 Corinthians 11, Paul is angry with the church in Corinth, not because we get to that portion of like let a man examine himself, right? Not because they sinned, but because they are partaking in communion, the body of Christ, and they are not unified as a church, as a people. That's crazy, and so he's angry. He's pissed.
he's lighting things up. Yeah.
And so that's how serious we need to take unity as pastors, as church leaders, as people. We need to take unity inside and outside of the four walls of the church. We need to take unity that serious. You know what I mean? And so, especially being at New Salem, man, that's what we're preaching is like we have to be unified despite our differences, despite our different philosophies and ideologies, especially political, despite our upbringings even, right? And our experiences, we have to be unified. And the only way to do that is in Christ, right? That's that's the biggest and only thread that can weave somebody, even as I look at my marriage, right? Beth and I are complete opposites in so many different ways. And it's like on paper, we probably wouldn't work, but because of Jesus.
That's you preaching. That's right. Put that in the sermon book. I need to see that at least in June.
In June, go ahead,
First Sunday in June, we having communion, and then we're gonna talk about how marriage works with Jesus.
Oh,
the
man.
unity, the common unity that we have. Yeah, that's good. All right, last one.
All right.
I said 4.
You
and
said
then
4. I know. I
30
took. Yeah, I know.
I was like, I forgot he grew up
that's
in
me.
South Carolina.
Yes. Yes, you did. Yes, I did.
As I'm closing. Pastor, you said that 15 minutes ago.
20 minutes ago.
Oh, but side note, one thing I love about Pastor Jones, man, when I first had a chance to hear him preach, he was like, all right, I'm closing out now. And I thought to myself, all right, he
about to hit a stride.
My man was done in 2 minutes. I was like, he was serious.
Yo, he preached a eulogy in 3 minutes.
That boy bad.
He eulogized somebody in 3 minutes.
Wow.
And it was probably the second best eulogy I've ever heard. And that includes eulogies that I've heard like from John Piper and Tim Keller and like some of these bigger names.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 minutes.
That is, you get a chance to learn from him. That's really awesome. It's, I think I've shared this with you before, and I've shared this with him. I told him that I appreciate him because he represents a generation of pastors that are different than our generation of pastors.
Ooh.
I was like, these guys walk through so much so that we can have the opportunity to build.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, they not only we live in a world here in the Pacific Northwest where racial diversity is something that is celebrated. When they started their ministries out here, resources were limited. They weren't like all these grants all around and stuff for them to access and things, right? And they had to work through so much. But they stayed accountable. They stayed persistent. They stood on the word. They preached in season and out of season.
Man.
Like that generation. And it's interesting because when we had a chance to get some lunch, he was telling me, he's like, I know your dad. He's like, Bob, yeah, I know your dad. And he's like, I thought I knew that name. And I knew he knew my dad because when he said his name, Bob, most people say, oh yeah, I remember Pastor Hughes. I'm like, yeah, you knew him in the church.
You knew him in the church.
But to say I know your Bob, like you called him before, or like y'all, you guys have talked or whatnot, and he was a part of that. He's a part of that generation, and that is man, that's like for me, that's like the Canes out here, Reverend Kane.
Yeah.
That's the Pastor Christopher who just retired from Shallow Baptist. Got to shout out.
Huge shout out. I got to sit down with him last week. So
Did you really?
Oh man.
Oh, yeah. He's done so much in our community.
Oh my word.
Bishop White. I mean, like this generation of pastors that has gone on before us that have done so much. I am so thankful. I mean, I can literally just write off like Pastor Davis from Genesis Baptist Church, Pastor Clark from Friendly Baptist, Stillicum back in the day.
Go ahead.
Pastor Paris from God's Holy Word, Pastor Stinson from Galilee Baptist, which is pretty close to
right around where we are.
Man, these are battle tested, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Pastor Fuller, right? Pastor Fuller, for sure. So these are just people that, from a childhood, we've had a chance to see them commit.
Yeah.
And it has allowed us to see a form or a function. This is another reason why I agree. You got to have the gray hairs. You got to have the gray hairs in your congregation to help pull and lean in and be their Jethros.
Yes.
Right? To kind of give this advice. And so it's beautiful. All right, here we go. Last word.
Okay.
Are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Healing.
Oh man, yeah, that's a great word. I think where we are as a country, where we are as a church, it's time for healing. And not in some superficial healing, like Jesus type of healing, like souls being saved, people being released from this craziness. COVID hit, man, and reality hit a lot of people, and I feel like we're still in that, like not necessarily COVID and the health scare, but just people had time to reflect, and people realize that systems are broken, people are broken, things are broken, and we need healing right now. And that's only going to come through Jesus.
Amen.
That's only going to come through the word being preached. That's only going to come through faithfulness. That's only going to come through service. That's not going to come through any sort of politics or political leader or, bills being passed. While those things are important, right? Those things are very important, and God uses them. But without the foundations of the gospel, without the gospel going forth, there's no healing. And so, but it's time for it. It's time for it. It's time for it, especially in our churches. I think I'm gonna be honest, man. I think the American church is in a spot where it's a make it or break it season, and we're either gonna. I really think about the Jesus People movement back in the day. Like we're on the cusp of something like that, right? And so we've got a choice to make. Are we going to preach the gospel faithfully, or are we gonna just go along with the TikTok and the Instagram type stuff and just try to get people in the church?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like we are there, and that's what and to me that provided a ton of healing. The Jesus People movement provided a ton of healing for the United States, for different cultures, for different people. And I think that's where we're at, is like, let's walk into that. Let's step into that. It's scary. I'm sure those folks that led that, especially down, kind of starting down in Southern California and spreading around. I know that was scary, right? As a leader, as a human being, as a man, that's scary to lead something like that. But we got to step into it. Yeah. And we've got the resources. We've got the talent. God has put everything in the room that we need. It's right here. We just got to walk in our calling.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Jamal, my man.
Bobby.
Thank you. Thank
Absolutely,
you. Where
brother.
can people find out more information about New Salem Baptist?
Oh, man. NewSalemTacoma.com. Check us out. We also have a Facebook page. You'll see it on there as well. We're rolling out our new website next week. So yeah, come check us out. And then in person, that's where we really want to see you, in person. 56 in Birmingham. You'll see us right there on the corner, big blue sign, New Salem Church. So come check us out.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.
All right, man.